as mothers in general, we get a lot of messages, cultural messages about what it means to be a mother and what, a good mother looks like. And those things, selfless, self-sacrificing, it's completely blissful, it's completely happy, everything is amazing, it's worth it. And it doesn't leave a lot of space for the difficult emotions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. As always, I am so happy to be here with you today. And you're going to be so happy to be here because you're going to learn a lot from these two incredible women, Julia Sarewitz and Victoria Trinko. They're the co-founders of Seed Mother. And we'll talk about what the transition to motherhood really involves, the spiritual components of it, the idea or the concept of matrescence. We'll go into what that is. But I want to tell you a little bit about them before we get started. So Julia Sarewitz is the co-founder of Seed Mother with Victoria Trinko. Julia is a matrescence educator, a wellness and spirit coach at journeysmeditation.com, and a mother to Nash. And Victoria Trinko is the co-founder of Seed Mother, as I just mentioned, a matrescence educator as well, a yoga teacher, and the adoring aunt of her nephew, Monty. Now, both women received their MA in psychology and education from Teachers College, Columbia University, with a spirituality, mind-body concentration. And Victoria has an advanced certificate in sexuality, women and gender, reproductive and maternal well-being. And that's where she actually met her co-founder, Julia. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment, but I wanted to welcome you both. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your journey to this work and what the work is.
Yeah, so my journey to this work was sort of motivated by having my son. I had him, and then I started my graduate program. And that's when I fell into learning about this concept of matrescence. And it really launched me into understanding that becoming a mother wasn't something that was so black and white. And that had been my experience, but that had never been named for me. And so I felt like learning about matrescence and learning about the opportunities for transformation and also just the permission to be where I was when I was. No one had ever told me that. And I felt like what I learned really shifted my entire experience of being a mother. And I wondered, why is this not being shared with the world? That's when I was enrolling in a workshopping practicum taught by the illustrious Dr. Tracy Stein, and sort of stumbled upon someone in the workshop who had a deep interest in mothering and motherhood, and that brought me to connecting with Victoria.
Yeah. So I'm not yet a mother, so my path was a little bit different into this work, but essentially, like during the beginning of the COVID pandemic, my sister and my best friend both became mothers for the first time. And I witnessed a lot of the struggle and the distress they experienced throughout that experience. And so that kind of started to pique my interest in this field. But there was really something that was calling me or drawing me into exploring motherhood that I didn't really fully understand at the time. And I came across Dr. Ethan's work, saw her website, saw her course, Mother-Child Matrix, and I just felt completely like intrigued by it and wanted to know more. And so I took it my first semester, and it just completely like broke things open for me. It illuminated a whole new path forward. To backtrack, 6 months prior to my start at SMB, I lost my brother quite unexpectedly. And it was obviously a horrible time in my life. It was extremely disorienting and filled with grief. And felt really overwhelming and lonely at times. And, that as I moved through that experience, it was painful, but it also opened me up to new ways of being in the world and opened me up to this really immense time of personal growth and transformation. And so while I was in this mother-child matrix class, I was noticing that so much of what mothers were experiencing, or so much what we were talking about of the transition to motherhood, seemed to mirror my own experience of my own transition and the pain that I felt, and then the growth that came from that pain. So kind of this idea of the purposeful pain. And that was when I also, met Julia. And so we came up with this idea to kind of bring these concepts and these ideas together to create a workshop for mothers that address those concepts.
Really, it's so powerful what you're both saying. And Victoria, again, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And it's so interesting that somehow dovetailed with your learning about, bringing life into the world. I'm wondering if you both can talk a little bit more about matrescence specifically, because it's a term that is very unfamiliar to most people, especially outside of academia. And you're right, it's not something we talk about.
Yeah, so matrescence is a term that was created in the 70s by a doula who wanted to define this sort of transitional part of one's life if and when they become a mother. And then Dr. Aurelie Athan, who is a professor at Teachers College, Columbia, sort of brought that term back into the general, brought the term back into the world. And her most simple way of defining it is it's matrescence like adolescence. It's a time of transition where basically the transition to becoming a mother. There's no defined beginning. There's no defined ending. It's going to be experienced very differently by every person going through it. And there's very similar domain changes that happen within the process of adolescence and with the process of matrescence. For example, your social experiences might change. Your physiological experiences change. Your hormonal experiences change. There's potential for spiritual changes to occur. So there's various domains that really every person has a different experience with the depth of change within each domain. Victoria, do you want to add on to any of that?
Yeah, I think, what this term brings to the field, which is kind of quite different from what exists, is this developmental lens. So, we have a lot of clinical, work that's being done in the motherhood space, but not a lot of developmental that focuses purely on the mother versus on the child, and looks at the mother's lived subjective experience as being something that's worthy of being shared and of being studied and of being, brought into the forefront of the experience.
I just want to recap for people listening what you're saying, because there's so much there. There's no defined beginning or end really to this process, right? So it could be somebody who is thinking about becoming a mother, someone who is in the very initial stages of pregnancy, or I'm assuming adoption, or fostering. It is the period when most often your body is changing in a way that is completely new to you.
Right.
And I love that you talk about your social world changing, because it's not something that you could prevent from changing. And a lot of people seem to have some growing pains around that. And then the spiritual dimension.
Right. A lot of people experience a deep loss because of those changes that feels deeply like grief. And when we are able to sort of normalize that experience, and offer Seed Mother. One of our pillars is offering ritual, offering the opportunity to allow yourself to experience that grief through ritual, and to, if you are ready and when you are ready, let go of it, for example, to move into this new place. That can be really, really profound shift of perspective for someone who's either becoming a mother or who has become one.
I love that you talk about how historically the focus has been on the child. And I want to come back to Seed Mother and what your work looks more specifically like in a moment. But the work has typically, or the focus has typically been on, oh, you bring this baby into the world, maybe buying things or preparing a room or taking care of your health in order to take care of the baby. And there hasn't really been social room or psychological space for having some feelings that are not uniformly positive and joyful all the time. Like you said, that grief, it's almost like something that has been something we can't talk about. I love that you're creating space for that, because it's very real. And I think a lot of times people really suffer over, is it okay to have the feelings they're feeling? Have you found that with women that you've worked with?
Yeah, I think just as mothers in general, we get a lot of, messages, cultural messages about what it means to be a mother and what, a good mother looks like. And those things, selfless, self-sacrificing, it's completely blissful. It's completely happy. Everything is amazing. It's worth it. And it doesn't leave a lot of space for the difficult emotions that can arise in motherhood that are perfectly normal and natural part of the experience. But we don't always, there's a lot of stigma around it, and we don't always give mothers the space to express some of those more difficult emotions or difficult experiences. And in that kind of repression or ignoring that part of it, it can create a lot of distress or feelings like there must be something wrong with me, or this must be my fault that I'm feeling this way because this is not normal, but it is.
I'm in month 9 of my second pregnancy, and it's
congratulations.
Thank you. It's thank goodness for having done this work. And we just ran a big group, 2 groups recently. And I'm just so grateful for having all of those people in the groups as well to sort of support and bounce back at me that I've had a lot of maternal indifference in this pregnancy, which not negative, but not positive. And because of the foundation that Victoria has helped build for me and other people, it made me feel like that's okay. This is going to shake out the way it shakes out. And now I'm starting to feel more connected. And so I didn't feel distressed during that ambivalent time, which is such a gift.
That's so important. So you two came together and founded Seed Mother. And I want to talk more about that. You mentioned a few moments ago that your workshop creates space for women to explore all of these feelings and help them through this transition, and to be an important part, not just a vehicle during their transition to motherhood. Talk a little, when you say ritual, I think a lot of people some people may not understand what you mean. What are some of the tools or exercises that you have found helpful in helping women to go through this process under the ritual umbrella? But what do those exercises and tools look like?
Yeah, so we sort of separate out within so the 3 pillars are education, teaching about really what the data and what research says around all of the psychology behind matrescence, and behind personal transformation. And then there's ritual, and then there's building community. And what is really important to us when we talk about creating ritual with our workshopping participants is that whatever ritual might work for them now might not work for them in a month, or so whatever can feel supportive for them now. We teach a lot about self-compassion. We, for example, will do some journaling in a workshop just to see if that sticks. We'll do things like something that I accidentally fell into when I was a first-time mom was I would put my feet in the bath when I was bathing my son, and I would think of it as a ritual. Okay, I'm receiving a gift to myself as well as checking something off the list. Pouring your tea in the morning can become a ritual. And really what it is it's having a habit throughout your day that has an intention behind it, that it's self-loving, that it's mindful, and that it's a gift for you personally. Victoria, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think like Julia was saying that one thing about ritual that differentiates it from a habit is this layer of intention, but also of meaning making. And the fact that the ritual is imbued with meaning. And I think that can be helpful in a lot of ways, because in times of transition and instability, helping us make sense and make meaning of whatever our experience is part of what helps us move through it. But I think the other piece of why we, believe in ritual so strongly is this, that it really gives us an opportunity for self-reflection and for us to go inwards and to, for a lot of mothers, they maybe have been taught to disavow their voice or, to privilege the outer voice over their inner voice. So it's really about creating space for them to kind of tune in and, get clearer about what their values are, what their needs are, what their thoughts are, so that they can then also ask for what it is that they actually need, not what society tells them that they need.
And these really are little bite-sized moments that that's as much as we can do oftentimes.
So important. And, there's so much there. The bite-sized moments, I think for most people today, even people who are not in the process of becoming a parent, it's just hard to find a lot of time. And I love that you make it so doable. And I love that you talk about what the difference is between, simple self-care, which is something that people almost say reflexively, and it's important. But a lot of times it's hard for people to prioritize because they see it as either, like you're saying, self-indulgent or selfish, or, and at odds with the self-sacrificial model that so many people have about motherhood. But it's more than just doing something that's relaxing to the body. That intention and that self-compassionate focus is, I think it's so much more healing than people realize until they do it.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's been reflected by our workshop participants as well.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually. The feedback that you've gotten, tell me a little bit about that. What have people said, and what are people asking for more of?
One thing that a lot of people have responded with was, why didn't I know about this? Or why isn't this being taught? Which I think was really, validating in a lot of ways, because you're like, yeah, why isn't it being taught?
Right.
And, simultaneously, they're also expressing like just simply learning about matrescence or learning about, how to practice rituals in these small ways helps them completely, or has helped them completely reframe their experience of motherhood, and maybe to show themselves a little bit more compassion in the difficult times. And that was something that's been reflected with a lot of our participants. So yeah, it just, shows us how powerful this work can be.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of people who pre-workshop or at the beginning list all of the things that are hard or all of the things that are wrong. And really they're more sort of like daily task oriented things. And then at the end of the workshop, when they are sharing about their experiences, they sort of have a little bit more nuanced perspective of what's going on. And you can see that they've zoomed out a little bit to give themselves this space to be more fluid and to allow everything to sort of just be what it is. And it's, there seems to be a little bit more attention rather than on the tasks and the to-do list, and a little bit more on the self.
And we believe it's that shift in perspective. These, a lot of these practices are also, the research shows that they help support well-being, but really we believe it's that shift in perspective, and that learning how to be with the experience, whatever it is, that ultimately then increases their sense of well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch base a little bit deeper on the spiritual component, because I know that, again, outside of the Spirituality Mind Body Institute, where everybody seems to kind of, that's just something we talk about all the time. A lot of people outside of there will conflate spirituality and being religious. We know that they're not the same. And how does spirituality enter into this state of matrescence, of becoming a mother, of this parenting journey? How have you found this to happen?
Yeah, well, for me, I had a very solidified, robust spiritual practice before I became a mother. And it was all of the sort of a collection of practices that I had that helped to get me through becoming a mother at the peak of a pandemic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it was when I started learning about matrescence and sort of all of this sort of psychology behind transformation, that I put together that it was this spiritual practice or wellness practices that made it so I was mostly okay. And there's some research and a lot of sort of knowledge around the idea that there, in times of transition and in times of difficulty, there is opportunity for spiritual expansion, for expanded perspective. I feel like the most commonly spoken about spiritual experience that mothers have is this experience of oneness with other mothers around the world. I remember when I was having my son, I was thinking how many other women are birthing right now and feeling like these life portals are opening. And, it went very deep upon reflection, like we are this connectedness and oneness. And that really opened me up to this idea of really like how connected and linked we all are. That was a really beautiful experience for me. And I think that's very commonly experienced by people who become mothers. There's also some writings around in adolescence, a similar transitional life period where this is Dr. Lisa Miller wrote about this, where two sides of the same coin would be adolescent depression or adolescent spiritual expansion. And when we don't support an adolescent in this opportunity to open up to spirit and to newness, they can come into depression. And I feel very strongly that that's a very similar thing to what happens in matrescence as well.
Yes. And Dr. Ethan also wrote a paper called The Spiritual Opportunities of New Motherhood. And it kind of goes through a lot of the different, so like Julia was saying, this sense of interconnectedness, interrelatedness, but a lot of the kind of spiritual tenets that you hear about. So empathy, compassion, mindfulness, present focused awareness, just unconditional love. A lot of these things, mothers have expressed that they experiencing those things, or those things were expanded, like expansion of ego, or a loss of ego, but then an expansion of self. And so, we see that motherhood can inherently be a spiritual experience and can help support our sense of belonging to something greater and being, part of something greater, if supported as such,
Right.
and if acknowledged that it has this opportunity.
So important. Now, you have talked about the research on matrescence and motherhood and spirituality. You both have been engaged in research fairly recently. I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about that, what you learned or what was important.
Yeah, so we working with the maternal psychology lab at Teachers College Columbia, with the support of that lab, we just ran a study of 2 groups of mothers, people who identify as mothers, and we ran basically our workshop in both groups, to see and if we can measure the efficacy of this intervention that we've developed. So we just concluded our post-assessment. So we're getting into the sort of data crunching mode right now. But it was, for me, profound experience getting to sort of work with 2 groups of people who, we found them differently because we did this through the lab, and it just, again, seemed like it was something that is of deep value just from what we've seen, just scratching the surface of looking at the results for the people who participated. So we're really excited to actually get in and see what the numbers really tell us.
Yeah, I think the qualitative data so far has really reaffirmed and proven a lot of our original hypotheses. But like Julia said, we're excited to see how the quantitative data, if and how that backs that up. But it was a really incredible and learning experience for us too, and just to see how also grateful and these women were to have a space to just talk about the experience of motherhood, and how little opportunities they get elsewhere to dive in and dig into their experience and have other people that want to hear their story. And I think that just in itself was incredibly powerful.
Definitely.
Yeah, we find that this first 2 years of motherhood, and myself included, there's an amnesia around it. It's probably biological. And so oftentimes people who have become a mother are told, probably in loving ways, like white knuckle it, you'll get through it. Everything's, it'll all be okay on the other side. And I think just having a container, just like what Victoria said, to share your story, to not belittle, or dumb down your story, that every single person's experience is different and important to share, was hugely powerful. We continued making more and more space in each workshop session just for sharing, because that is such a powerful experience for all of us.
And so needed. So do you have any workshops coming up or anything planned for the coming year, if not the next few months? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're going to be offering a new one-time prenatal intensive, so a 3-hour workshop, and that will be on Saturday, November 4th. And we'll be planning to offer more of these intensives in the immediate future, and we'll update our website with dates. And that's really just an opportunity to kind of introduce women that are expecting, or, welcoming a child through adoption or surrogacy, to kind of just familiarize themselves with the concept of matrescence, familiarize themselves with some of these, unexpected sometimes changes that they might experience. And then to give them, an idea of just some ritual practices and a journal that they can start reflecting on their experience as they move into it. And then in January, we'll be offering our 6-week series for new mothers for the postpartum period. And that will be, I think, in January of 2024. And again, you can go to our website, seed-mother.com or at seedmother on Instagram to learn more details and to get exact dates and times for those.
Wonderful. And I'll put your information in the show notes, definitely. Before we finish, I want to make sure I ask you, what is it that you want other women to take away from this today? And what is it, something like one thing, if there was only one thing that they had to keep in mind, what would that be? It could be more than one thing.
I would say your experience is normal. It's okay. You are loved. You are supported. And there's nothing, you're not doing anything wrong.
I also think one thing, there's this expectation or popular belief that you become a mother overnight when you give birth. And I think just keeping in mind that it's a process and that it looks differently for everybody and it can take as much time as it takes can be really helpful in just showing ourselves a little bit more compassion and more kindness when it doesn't maybe look the way that we thought it would. And the other thing is that also just preparing for this process and better equipping oneself for it is possible. And, there's a lot of things about new motherhood that are completely uncertain and out of our control, but the way that we show up and the way that we respond to it is within our control.
So true. And it's such really helpful and impactful information. I wanted to thank you both for being here, Victoria and Julia. So great to see you and such important information. Again, it's seed-mother.com where people can find you. I'll put that in the show notes. This has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you enjoyed the episode, please remember to like, share, and follow. And as always, until next time, be well.